7 years ago, my life unraveled in a way I never could have imagined. I was 25, head over heels in love, and thought I'd found my forever with Daniel, my boyfriend of 3 years. We weren't rich. Our apartment was a cramped little box with mismatched furniture, but we had something I thought was unbreakable. Late night talks about opening a coffee shop together, weekend hikes where we'd bicker over who forgot the water, stolen kisses over burnt dinners I'd tried to salvage. I was happy, even if my bank account wasn't impressive. Then one ordinary Tuesday, he shattered it all. "I've met someone else," he said, his voice cold and flat, like he was reading a weather report. I stood there frozen as he shoved clothes into a duffel bag. "Her name's Vivian. She's older, successful, and she can give me a life you can't." My throat tightened, but no tears came. Not yet. I just watched as he explained how this wealthy real estate tycoon had swept him off his feet with promises of luxury and status. He didn't even glance back as he walked out the door, leaving me alone in the ruins of what I thought was our future. The weeks that followed were a fog of pain. I'd scroll through social media and see him with her. Vivian, with her platinum hair, sharp cheekbones, and an air of confidence that screamed money. She was at least 20 years older than him, but she had a polish I couldn't touch. There was Daniel, my Daniel, posing in tailored suits next to her, grinning beside flashy cars and sprawling estates. Meanwhile, I was eating instant noodles in a half-empty apartment, wondering how I'd been so wrong about him. Friends said he'd traded love for a paycheck, but that didn't soften the blow. I felt like a thrift store sweater he'd tossed aside for something designer, worthless and forgotten. But I didn't stay down. Life doesn't pause for heartbreak, and neither did I. I threw myself into my job at a small marketing firm, earned a promotion, and started rebuilding piece by piece. Dating was off the table. Trust was a casualty of his betrayal. But I found my footing. Over the next 7 years, I climbed the career ladder, saved up, and bought a sleek condo downtown. I even started a side hustle designing branding for startups, something I'd always wanted to try. By the time I turned 32, I was a different woman, stronger, sharper, and prouder than I'd ever been. Daniel faded into a distant memory, a cautionary tale I'd laugh about over wine with friends, a chapter I'd close for good. Or so I thought. Last Friday night, everything changed. It was a chilly March evening, and I'd agreed to meet my friend Sarah at La Belle Étoile, a swanky new restaurant everyone was raving about. I wasn't usually one for overpriced menus and pretentious vibes, but Sarah had just gotten engaged, and she insisted on celebrating somewhere fancy. I slipped into a little black dress, threw on some heels, and headed out, feeling good about the life I'd built from the ashes he'd left behind. The restaurant was stunning, dim chandeliers casting a golden glow, velvet chairs, and waiters who moved like they were part of the decor. Sarah texted that she was running late, classic Sarah. So I settled at the bar with a glass of Pinot Noir, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. That's when I heard it, a laugh I'd know anywhere. Deep, a little too loud, with that cocky edge I used to find charming. My head snapped up, and there he was. Daniel. 7 years older, but unmistakable. His dark hair was slicked back, and he wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He sat at a corner table with a group of polished people, all of them dripping in designer labels and fake smiles. My stomach twisted. I wasn't prepared for this. Not tonight, not ever. I could have bolted. Sarah would have understood if I'd texted her some excuse, a headache, a last-minute work call, but something kept me rooted to my stool. Curiosity, maybe, or a flicker of defiance. I wanted to see what had become of the man who'd walked away from me for a richer zip code. So I stayed, sipping my wine and watching him from across the room. He hadn't noticed me yet. He was too busy holding court, gesturing wildly as his companions laughed at whatever he was saying. I studied him. He looked good, polished, confident, but there was something off. His eyes darted around, like he was performing for an audience he wasn't sure he'd won over. I wondered if Vivian was there, but I didn't see her, just Daniel and his flashy entourage. Then it happened. He glanced my way, did a double take, and froze. Our eyes locked, and for a split second I saw the old Daniel, the one who'd once blushed when I caught him staring at me across a crowded room. But that guy was gone as fast as he'd appeared. He straightened up, excused himself from his table, and started walking toward me. Emma? His voice was smooth, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this moment. Is that really you? I kept my tone cool. Daniel, small world. He flashed that lopsided grin I used to love. You look… wow, you look amazing. I took a sip of my wine, letting the silence hang. Thanks. He shifted his weight, clearly expecting more from me. What are you doing here? This place isn't exactly cheap. I shrugged. Celebrating with a friend. You? He waved a hand dismissively. Oh, just a business dinner. You know how it is. I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Looks like you're doing well. He grinned wider. Yeah, you could say that. Life's been good. What about you? Still in that little apartment? His tone had a hint of condescension, and it lit a spark in me. No, I said, sharper than I meant to. I've moved up a bit since then. His grin faltered, but he recovered fast. Good for you. I always knew you'd land on your feet. I raised an eyebrow. Did you? He laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, Emma, don't be like that. We had some good times, didn't we? I didn't flinch. Sure. Until you walked out for someone with a bigger bank account. His face tightened, and for a moment I thought he might snap back, but he just chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Fair enough. I guess I deserve that. But look at us now. Both doing great, right? I didn't answer. I just watched him, letting him squirm under my gaze. He was fishing for something. Forgiveness, validation. I couldn't tell. But I wasn't here to give it. So, he said, breaking the tension, where's this friend of yours? I glanced at my phone. Running late. He nodded, leaning against the bar a little too close for my liking. Well, I've got some time. Mind if I join you? Before I could say no, he slid onto the stool next to me, signaling the bartender for a drink. I bristled but didn't stop him. Part of me wanted to hear what he'd say next. He sipped his whiskey, then turned to me with a softer look. I've thought about you, you know, over the years. I kept my expression neutral. That's nice. He sighed like he was frustrated I wasn't playing along. I mean it, Emma. Things with Vivian, they're not what I expected. That caught my attention, but I didn't let it show. Oh? He leaned in, lowering his voice. She's controlling. Everything's on her terms. Where we go, who I see, what I wear. I thought I'd get freedom with all that money, but it's like I traded one cage for another. Oh, on them. I couldn't help it. A tiny smirk tugged at my lips. Sounds rough. He didn't catch the sarcasm. It is. I miss simpler stuff, like us. I nearly laughed. Us? You mean the U.S. you dumped without a second thought? He winced. I know I messed up. I was young, stupid. I thought money would fix everything. But seeing you here, looking like this, maybe I made the wrong call. I set my glass down, turning to face him fully. Daniel, you didn't just make a wrong call. You broke my heart and walked away like it was nothing. I spent years picking up the pieces, and now you want to stroll back in and play the regret card? No thanks. He blinked, clearly not expecting that. I'm not asking for anything, Emma. I wanted you to know. I shook my head. I don't need to know. I've moved on. You should too. He opened his mouth to reply, but before he could, Sarah burst through the door, all smiles and apologies. Emma, sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare. She stopped short, eyeing Daniel. Who's this? I stood, smoothing my dress. Nobody important, ready to celebrate? Sarah grinned, oblivious to the tension. Absolutely. Let's grab our table. I didn't look back at Daniel as we walked away, but I could feel his eyes on me. For the first time in 7 years, I felt lighter, like I'd finally closed the door he'd left cracked open. Dinner with Sarah was perfect. We laughed, toasted her engagement, and split a ridiculously expensive dessert. I didn't mention Daniel again, and she didn't ask. As we left, I caught a glimpse of him back at his table, surrounded by his shiny friends, but looking smaller somehow, deflated. I didn't feel sorry for him. He'd made his choice, and I'd made mine. Outside, the night air was crisp, and I breathed it in deep. 7 years ago, he'd left me for a wealthy older woman, betting on money over love. Now here I was, thriving, free, and whole. And him, He was just a guy at a fancy restaurant, chasing a life that didn't fit. I smiled to myself as I walked to my car. The past was done, and my future was mine.